Okay, we're going to try this again, everybody. Sorry about this. I didn't get the audio ready, or I thought I had it ready, and I wasn't picking it up. So we will try this again. Now we're going to have 3 or 4 of these on the page. This should be fun. Welcome to my continued attempt at Facebook Live. My name is Carrie Lynn, and I am the writer of Finding Fitzgerald. I have been a Great Brain fan for 40 plus years. He was read to me when I was 11 years old on a camping trip, and I fell in love with John Dennis Fitzgerald's work from that point on. Loved him through my teen years. Um, Read him whenever I had a chance. He was like a best friend to me. I'd replay it in my imagination as I'd walk to school and hang out. As I grew up, I realized there were books that he had written prior to the Great Brain series, and so my mom and I went hunting for them but never found them. And eventually, my husband managed to locate a copy of his first published book, Papa Married a Mormon. And I didn't read it right off the bat. I waited a little longer after I got it. I shelved it. But after I read it, I'd wondered why certain parts of the story never carried over into the Great Brain. Like, where was the sister Katie, and who was this Uncle Will, and why didn't he come into the stories more? Because they all seem centralized and yet had these broken pieces. And the internet was just coming online at the time, so I did this quick internet search, and there was nothing out there. But I wanted to know more. I'd fallen in love with these people. They carried me through some of the roughest days of teenagehood and creativity I had, and so I went looking little by little, ounce by ounce, one letter at a time, until I started to piece together a story and took myself to Price, Utah, which was highly adventuresome for me because I don't normally travel on my own. I'm a bit of a homebody. And I went down there bravely, stuck a note in a door of what I thought was John's house, and it wasn't John's house. And I was quite surprised by the graciousness of the host who invited me to dinner that night. And they drove me all over town and showed me all these places that had been inspirations of John's life. And I knew I had to figure out the rest of the story. So we did. I spent 2 or 3 days in Price, and then I came home and started piecing together items I had. And it was never a linear process, it was a long hunt and wait. And I tend to get like discouraged, and then I'd get re-encouraged and come back again. And so we came to a point where we put everything that we had online, and the idea of writing a book came to be. I had planned it to be more of either a biography of John or a biography of the family or a nonfiction overlook at how his life had come to be, where the stories came from, and all of those things. And unfortunately, we didn't ever get enough pieces of all of it to make substantial headway in filling in the gaps that would normally happen in a biography. The items that I had received that I would love to have used to give a better look at the family and the dynamics of time could not be um, substantiated. Requirements that you need 2 substantiations to prove it limited it the things that we could use. The other thing is there were private letters, and many of those people who wrote those letters have since left this life, and so we didn't have permission from them to use those letters, even if they were positive comments about John or John's works. And so I was left to try to throw something together to answer some of those questions, and that is how Finding Fitzgerald came to be. It is how I found him, what the most poignant pieces that I could share and still have them not violate any spaces, and share a little bit of the story. One of the great things about now having the book out, though, is that I am going to be able to share some of the other details behind things, either through imagery, through discussion, and so forth to help you put together the story that brought The Great Brain or the other books if that's what you read the first time to life. Um, my hope is, now that we're learning how to do this, that maybe every Friday I can come on with a little bit more of a detail. We can give you some graphics. We can bring this story to life for you, because one of the things I think it's imperative with the stories is we all come from family, and family is imperfect in its most amazing way. And you never know what family story your family is going to tell. And if you get to be the author of it, whether it's verbally just recounting an account when you sit around the table, whether it's something that you write or a note you write to a child or a grandchild that you take for a walk and say, I remember when, those are the things that you're going to do that's going to shape the rest of the world. And so my hope is that we can enjoy some time together. If you have questions, I would be happy to take them here. We'll wait for a couple minutes. Otherwise, you can ask them on the page and we'll start conversations then, and I will use those for other live discussions. Um, I really appreciate it. We had a goal set and you helped me exceed my goal. And there's actually, you can't see it because of the way the camera is, but my royalty check from this book sits in front of me as a reminder that there are people who will support us in anything we want to do. And you guys have been fantastic for supporting me. I know it's Easter weekend. I hope you're having a great time with your family, and that you're taking care. We are cherishing family a lot right now. We have a family member in Scotland who is healing from COVID-19, and we have missed her desperately, and super glad to be able to connect with her, and thank heavens for technology. Chris grew up in Helper, Utah, and you had no idea my favorite author was writing about Price and had grown up there. Isn't that crazy? Helper's such a cute town. Chris, I had so many hopes that we would be going to Helper, to the mining museum. It was part of the plan, but we have postponed it. So come back in 2021 and we'll go visit your stomping ground, and you can take us around there and we can go to the museum, because that's actually somewhere where I got my favorite picture that launched a million ideas that I did not realize. Um, what is my favorite book of John? Somebody wants to know. That's a tough one. So my favorite book would have to, of course, be the first, which is The Great Brain, because it's the story I heard first of all, and the genius of a kid realizing he could fund a project through getting people to flush a toilet just tickled me pink at 11 years old. That was like, man, if I could pull something off like that. So the first book, because it's your first love, I'm always there. Um, Probably my second, boy, this is a tough one. I actually love Mama's Boarding House. There's a poignancy to that book that I don't think John hits anywhere else. And if I had to answer it for my kids, they would say Great Brain at the Academy. And I that's still their favorite. So we each have a favorite book, definitely. But yeah, the flooding at the end of Mama's Boarding House gets me every time. Oh wow. So Chris says where the mining equipment is where his grandma and grandpa's Wall's house was. Wow. You really could take us someplace like that, because that was very much the backbone of the story and the community of Price as a center. Be careful, Chris, or we just may have a day that's Chris's day next year when we tour around. That would be neat to see. That would be neat to see. So for those of you that are readers, I'll ask questions back and you can answer here. What are your favorite books and or chapters? Chris, when did you read The Great Brain? Or which books did you read first? I do know where that flood actually happened. Elaine asked where the flood actually happened. And this is one of those fun tidbits that we couldn't figure out how to put into a book. Um, there were actually two Prices in Utah. There is the Price that John lived in, which is where Chris lives. And there was a Price in Dixie, Utah, or southern Utah, down by St. George and that area. And it flooded year after year after year. So settlers would settle in it. It was this beautiful valley. Things were great. And then it would flood and wipe it all out. And so they'd start all over again. And this happened over and over again. Ironically, I found out because my sister went over to a woman's house. She was having a video game night, which is really funny because she's like in her 80s, but she hosts video game nights. And she was talking about growing up in Price. And my sister said, "Oh, me, she's been to Price." And she goes, "She couldn't have. It's no longer there." And so if you go to Washington County, Utah, you will find the city of another Price, Utah listed there. And I believe that is where John took his inspiration for the final flood, was the floods there, because there would be nothing left, just like there was in the books. Um, Chris's favorite is the first book with the magic water closet, and then the Greek immigrant are my favorite chapters. And Chris, yes, thank him for those Greek immigrants. If you come next summer, we will be joining in the Greek festival with the people of Price, and it's a lot of fun. They do Greek dancing, they serve Greek food, you get to play games. It's really neat. And you get to finally go in their church and see it. And the immigration that happened in the city of Price for reals is legitimate. John didn't have to make that up. Now, whether characters were created off of a combination of characters or if there was actually a Coco Venus family, I never could find that out completely, but there are enough there to give him something to work with. And so it's going to be fun to share touching their history and touching John's history and his inspiration for it. And yes, the Magic Water Closet is definitely my favorite. I'm trying to think what else. Chris, where are you from? And we know Chris Lozier. So we know where Chris Wall is from. So where's Chris Lozier? If I pronounce it right, Losier. Where are you from? So I'll answer you, Chris, and then you can answer me on the chat. So my thoughts on why John changed his dates is because he had family still living in the area, and I think he wanted to respect their space, their privacy, let them live their lives out, and not have people sort of interrupting it. Especially, and one of those people would be his brother Tom. And if you've read Finding Fitzgerald, you can appreciate why he might have wanted to let Tom just have some space and not have lots of us interested people making a hobby of passing by the family home and knocking on the door and seeing if he was there. Um, I think ironically what I find is that over time enough people have moved to Price, traveled to Price, made vacations to Price, written articles to the newspaper about why John's work isn't more, um, I don't know, pronounced in the community. And for some reason, whatever lid got put over it, it's still stuck there. I've gone into the library before. I've called people newspapers and nobody. Oh, really? He's in the area. He was in the area. This is from our town, and it's kind of a surprising area. So, but I think it was out of respect for his brother that he dialed back the dates when it was his turn to write the first book. He realized by then he'd have four siblings still alive, actually more than that. He had all of his siblings, so giving them the space they needed. And welcome from Michigan. Thanks for coming by, Chris. I appreciate it. Ah, I got it right. Good job. Proud of myself. John writes in the introduction to Papa Married a Mormon, he says it's history per se. And I think that was the best answer he could give for his family, his intent, and what he went. So a lot of it really was based off of it. Started as a family history to his nieces and nephews. John didn't have children of his own, but he had nieces and nephews that he really enjoyed. And he and his siblings, after Mama passed away, had verbally sort of recounted the family story because as they were going through these chests with all the story in it, they started writing what they remembered and how they remembered it. And so that is my guess is that's how he came up to it. And then when he sat down to write it, he decided to shift it on behalf of all of that. Wow, plans in the works. Ah. So definitely next year's festival, which now that we have a whole year, I'm hoping that gets us more people for to come to meet each other. It would be a lot of fun. And actually, the people who were going to host us, the Ramada Inn, was super excited. They'd already planned a thing for us and a book signing, and the newspaper was going to run a couple articles leading up to it, and Helper Mining Museum was going to sell the books. So we've had to shift a few places. So we'll probably do that and maybe even a couple of other things. For Finding Fitzgerald, I'm not quite sure. I have some discussions with my editor about things that we might be able to do with the documentation that we have. But again, COVID-19's put everything on hold and what we can plan. If we're going to do it on a website, if we're going to do it in more book form, I don't know. Um, for me, I have other writing projects. I have a bunch of them. So if you want to keep following me, if you like my writing, one of the reasons I ever started the research on John's work was to use it as a model to write the stories that I grew up with. And my grandmother grew up as an orphan in Salt Lake City, Utah, at literally the same era that JD and TD were living in Price. And she always verbally told us the stories. And I would love to take my family history and make it readable, not just for my family, but for other people, because we don't talk about orphanages anymore. We don't have that in our construct of America like we once did. And I would love to take the romantic version that she presented to me and set it out there. So that's probably my next big project, but there's a lot of little ones in between. So we'll see where that goes. Are Uncle Mark and Uncle Kathy real people or based off of real people? So Aunt Kathy is based off of a real aunt who did live there in Price, who was married to someone that Papa grew up with. They both went to college together, Papa and the uncle, and he happens to have Thomas is his name too. So there's two Thomases, and they went into the same business together as they progressed. And she continued to live in the area. I go into more of her detail in Finding Fitzgerald, so I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't bought it. But if you're interested, there there are answers about Aunt Kathy there. Um, Uncle Mark, not that I can find. That doesn't mean that there wasn't. They were very centered as a family. Mama's family lived in the town of Emory, really close by. Her branch of the family, if you've read Papa Married a Mormon, they really were very active in building their community. They built the water system. They did some other things. And so it is very probable and possible that there was an Uncle Mark type character, but not quite as he comes out in the books. But I can't pin that one down. Frankie, so John's youngest brother says there was no Frankie. There are some other things that hint that people came and lived with the Fitzgeralds for a while, whether it was in a boarding house situation or adoption situation. So again, he may well have had someone. There was a suggestion that Frankie is based on John's two little brothers because for a while they were four kids. There was John, and then his two brothers and his sister. Those were the four initial kids. And then there's kind of a gap, and then two other siblings were born into the family. So is it possible that he just sort of morphed having two little brothers come into your life that also upend you and then gave them the name of Frankie? But seeing as he does adoptees in both uh, his first series of books, where he has Ernest and then he has Frankie in the younger ones, I'm going to assume that there must have been one. I just don't have any viable proof of it. So that's a great question. Thank you. So I wasn't sure how long this would run. This is our first one. I thank you guys for all sitting with me. If anybody has additional questions, if you want to put them up on the website or comment on this when it runs wherever, I'll pick them up for future ones. And now that I know what I'm doing, well, let's set a Friday date. And especially while most of us are still stuck at home, not doing much, and let's talk about them. Let's ask questions, and I'd love to share what I know, and I'll come up with some fun things to show you, maybe pictures and so forth for next time, and we'll learn more about Finding Fitzgerald. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful Easter. Enjoy whatever you're doing. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks. Bye.